Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from Red State from November 9th. It says top 5 human rights abuses Hamas and the Palestinian Authority have inflicted on their own people. This is one of those things that nobody seems to be talking about at all while the whole Israel Hamas Palestine conflict is going on. Is just what are the Palestinians doing to themselves. So let us get into that. And thank you to Jeff Charles, the author of this article, for actually shining a light on this because it is worth saying. So it says, as the war between Israel and Hamas rages on, public debate in the West on the overall conflict has also become more prominent, especially among Americans. Since Hamas launched its October 7th attack on the Jewish state, the fighting has been quite fierce with numerous casualties on both sides. However, amid the ongoing debate over the Israel Hamas conflict, one issue that has flown under the radar is the abuses that Hamas and other groups have inflicted on Palestinian civilians. Yep, that's exactly what I was saying. So let's see what it is. As the article lists the top 5, and I'm sure there's more, human rights abuses these groups have carried out over the duration of the Palestinian refugee crisis. Number 1, extrajudicial killings. Does the Palestinian Authority and Hamas have both been guilty of carrying out arbitrary executions without due process. A report written by Bassem Aid, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name, don't like doing that, says for the center or the middle center of the new Middle East is probably what it means to say, noted that there have been a considerable number of deaths at the hands of the Palestinian Authority in the absence of a death sentence or indeed any valid prosecution. Says in the Palestine Center for Human Rights annual report for 2014, 15 West Bank Palestinians were recorded as having been killed in the Palestinian Authority. Says, or should it say, by the Palestinian Authority? I don't know. Says these deaths came as a result of both the use of extreme force by PA security forces and mistreatment while in detention, as well as in cases relating to family disputes and instances of domestic violence and honor killings. In all, 2 of these individuals were killed during operations carried out by security services, while one died while being held in detention by the PA. Then there's the use of torture as number 2. It says torture remains a horrific and common practice under Hamas and the PA. Aid's report mentions severe mistreatment and willful neglect, along with extreme forms of torture, leading to deaths in custody. Using torture violates international human rights law and is typically employed by authoritarian regimes to extract information or to send warnings to dissenting voices in the communities being oppressed by the government. One of the favorite methods of torture employed by these organizations is known as shabe, according to Human Rights Watch. Can't read to see what this is. Does the organization's report tell the story of an activist and journalist who was tortured in this manner? This might be kind of graphic, but let's see. I haven't read this article yet. As a plainclothes officer met me at the door of the intelligence services prison in Jericho. He blindfolded me, handcuffed my hands behind my back, and started hitting me and slamming me against the walls. And this lasted for about 10 minutes. Okay, that's not as graphic as I was thinking, but that's still not good. As the officer took me to the warden's office and took the blindfold off, telling me that this was my welcome. An officer then said, hang him, as in take him to Shaba. Okay, so this is going to get bad. So I was then transferred from the office to the toilets. There they blindfolded me again, handcuffed me behind my back, put a piece of cloth and rope at the center of my handcuffs, and pulled it up to the side of the door. There was a hook between the door and the ceiling. And they pulled the cloth up, raising my hands behind my back. My legs were not shackled, and the tip of my legs were touching the ground. I was held in this stressed position for 45 minutes. An officer hit me with a big stick on my back between my shoulders more than once. Yeah, that sounds awful. So yeah, that's not great. I was thinking it was going to be some like ancient, like Byzantine sort of thing, but I'm not going to even get into what I was thinking. But it's again, it's horrible, but it's what I was going with in my head. So okay. This is 3, arbitrary arrest and detention. Both Hamas and the PA arrest political opponents, just as other authoritarian regimes have done throughout history. In fact, after Hamas was elected in 2007, it has not held another election and rules Gaza with an iron fist. In the West Bank, the PA has systematically rounded up dissenters and critics. So good people all around. It says both the Fatah-dominated Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and the Islamic Resistance Movement, that's Hamas, in Gaza, have in recent years carried out scores of arbitrary arrests for peaceful criticism of the authorities, particularly on social media, among independent journalists, on university campuses, and at demonstrations. As the Fatah-Hamas feud deepened despite attempts at reconciliation, PA security services have targeted supporters of Hamas and vice versa, relying primarily on overly broad laws, that criminalize activities such as causing sectarian strife or insulting higher authorities. The PA and Hamas use detention to punish critics and deter them and others from further activism. In detention, security forces routinely taunt, threaten, beat, and force detainees into painful stress positions for hours at a time. Yeah, so again, this is what the folks out there are, protesting, or, I guess we want to call it protesting, but this is what they're cheering on. So number four, suppression of peaceful protests. I again had a different word in my head. So suppression of peaceful protests, not riots. So that Hamas and the PA aren't exactly fans of freedom of assembly, especially if Palestinians are gathering together to protest these groups. Hamas, in particular, has been quite oppressive in silencing dissenting voices. In January 2017, when hundreds of protesters took to the streets to protest the electricity crisis, one activist was charged. Oh, I'm sorry, I was reading that as if it was kind of one sentence. So we'll stop there, go back. It says one activist was charged with inciting against the government, damaging public property, and calling for riots. And only released after he pledged not to participate in any unauthorized demonstrations. So we're basically going, we'll take your word for it. It says the PA and the West Bank has enjoyed similar practices to crack down on protests. In 2020, the organization arrested activists for protesting peacefully, according to Amnesty International. And Amnesty is very much on the side of Hamas in this whole thing. So on the 19th of July, authorities in the West Bank arrested 19 anti corruption activists for holding a peaceful protest in the city of Ramallah, which breached an overly broad COVID-19 ban on assembly. While the three were released, 16 were charged with illegally gathering and violating the emergency rules. All were released on bail. Their trial continued. I wonder if they're even still alive at this point. There's number five, no freedoms for press. One of the reasons why Hamas and the Palestinian Authority have support among Palestinians is because both entities work to silence dissenting views from views coming from journalists who are routinely censored and threatened. Jewish talk show host Dov Hikind brought this up when I interviewed him on his experience traveling through Israel after the October 7th attack. And Dov is a guy that you should talking about him like I know him. I don't. Uh, but definitely follow him on Twitter. He will keep you informed of the stuff going on. Former Democrat voter who has since left the party because of, well, anti Semitism and stuff like that. So he said, I mean, what's going on in Gaza? Yes, it's Hamas that's responsible, but it's not exactly a free society. You can't do an op ed in a local Gazan newspaper and complain about Hamas, or for that matter, complain about Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank. The others, you don't get a chance to voice your opinion. You don't get a chance to say enough is enough. You cannot be a moderate. You either follow what's being handed to you or things happen to you. Yeah, that's something fun. Wouldn't you want to live under that? As Reporters Without Borders explained that the Gaza Strip is a particularly inhospitable territory for press freedom. Hamas and the Islamic Jihad harass and obstruct journalists suspected of collaborating with Israel. While in the West Bank, critical websites are shut down by the Palestinian Authority, while journalists are arrested and interrogated in order to put pressure on the political opposition. Says these five abuses only scratch the surface when it comes to what Palestinian leaders are doing to the people they claim to protect. And that's what I said at the very beginning. I'm sure five doesn't even begin to cover what they're doing. And the author says, I will go deeper into this issue in future pieces exposing the cruelty Hamas and the PA have inflicted on their own people. And I haven't seen anything since then. When was this article? Was the 9th, did I say? Yeah, it was the 9th. And as of the recording, it's only a few days later, and I haven't seen anything since then. So, yeah, there isn't anything yet. But if that does come up, I will certainly go ahead and make a video about it so that everybody can be informed of what's really happening out there. So that'll be the end. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.